I've been very open about my belief that Pokopia is going to be a huge success on Nintendo Switch 2. And I've made numerous statements about that. And I do think it's time to speculate on how successful, because this is kind of the trend when it comes to Nintendo Switch 2 games at this point, is that they sell several million units, they're hugely successful, everyone loves them, and yet people still try and gaslight you into thinking they somehow failed. The chief example of this is probably Mario Kart World, which we know has sold upwards of 10 million units, but the entire community tried to rally and say that the online was dead, that people only bought the bundle, that nobody's playing it anymore, all of which we know now is not true. But again, like, this hugely successful 10 million seller, going to go on to be one of the best-selling games ever made, it was downplayed and ignored, and it will be probably until it hits like the 50 million unit sold mark, where like people are going to turn around and say like, well, of course it sold well, it's Mario Kart. Pokopia, I think, is going to be this year's equivalent of that, in which Nintendo is going to release this game, it's going to do huge numbers, I'm talking like probably around 10 million or more. Okay, and that seems kind of, that seems very, 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 very generous, but honestly, like, the more I look into this, I think it very well may be on the low end. I do very much think that this is exactly what the Switch 2 needs right now, is that this Pokemon spin-off life sim is something that I think will appeal to a lot of people, especially people who don't necessarily make a habit out of buying every Pokemon release. You know, this may not do well just because it's Pokemon, but because life sims are such a huge deal. And again, this is one of those things that people don't understand. You know, we had that situation with the Farming Direct a couple of years back. Is that like, why'd they show off so many farming games? It's because they're insanely popular. That's the reality behind it. That's like the truth behind it. And that's what we're going to see with Pokopia, is that we very well may see a very innovative, unique life sim game that kind of goes beyond what the rest of the industry, the genre is capable of, to make something very interesting, fresh, and exciting. And everything I've seen seems to indicate that. But the narrative has always been that, like, oh yeah, this game looks like a mobile game, it looks like slop, it looks bad, and I'm looking at it and I'm just like, this is going to outperform most AAA products this year. Okay, I've been saying that from the beginning. Like, most AAA games are not going to do the numbers that Pokopia is going to do. And, like, it's very, very interesting to see that, like, how out of touch and delusional the community as a whole is about this. Like, they are not happy with, like, how this game is being marketed and how it's being promoted. You know, I've seen so many people try and say that, like, oh yeah, they have a pre-order bonus, so that means the game isn't doing well. Pre-order what? It's just like, what are you talking about? You know, like, all the criticisms towards this game are not only giant nothing burgers, but are also, like, kind of a big deal, honestly. Like, when you look at people, like, denouncing this game and saying Pokemon's on the way out, like, all you can think about is how, like, boomers were screaming at you about this for 30 years. Like, Pokemon's a dying fad. No one cares about it. Like, it's so weird to me how, like, everyone is, like, perfectly fine with obsessing over, like, Ninja Turtles or, like, these random 80s action cartoons. And then, meanwhile, first of all, Pokemon was better than all that shit. First of all. But second of all, Pokemon's been, like, way more successful for way longer than any of that. Like, it's never had to be rebooted. Like, they've constantly, consistently put out, like, high-quality titles every 3 years, okay? With, like, the spin-offs and, like, the merchandise and all stuff. Like, Pokemon is killing it right now. And we're constantly dealing with this nonsense from boomers about how kids don't like Pokemon and how it's going to die a miserable death and how, like, nobody plays anymore. And it's like, it's the most sad, pathetic thing I've ever seen. Like, they're trying to turn it into a self-fulfilling prophecy. They always have. You know, they've been trying to push this meme that, like, everyone hates Pokemon and that, like, Pokemon's fallen off and Pokemon's become ridiculous. And, like, it actually is just an amazing IP that stood the test of time, that's been constantly innovates and constantly does new things. like Pokopia is a very, very good example of that. And I feel like the community is going to be very, 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 very much blindsided by what they do going forward. Like that's just the reality going into this, is that I think people are very strongly underestimating how big Pokopia is going to be. That's kind of been my prediction for a long time, and I'm very curious if this specifically is what's going to make like the Switch 2 very popular in the mainstream. I feel like after this specific release, it's going to be very, very hard to continue the farce that like Switch 2 has no games. Okay, like it's already kind of dead in the water, and it has been since launch. But like, people have been very desperate to try and push this narrative for a while, and it just feels like all the negative coverage of this game is gonna fall flat on its face. It's just unbearably stupid. It really does need to be like spelled out more. Just how the community is just desperate to try and downplay these games, and it's just not really resonating with people. I do think Dexit is probably the worst situation we've ever gone through when it comes to backlash. And the thing about Dexit, and the thing that really needs to be like pointed out about like Pokemon haters in general, is that like most of the people who are like obsessed with it don't actually play the games. It's very, very common for these people to come out and like make these statements about how like, oh, I haven't played Pokemon since Gen 1. Like, okay, then why would I listen to you? It's like anybody who says that they were huge Pokemon fans and then like fell off in Gen 8, like in my experience, they're just lying to you. And I think we're going through like a similar situation with Pokopia. And not only, and since we're going through a similar situation, we're seeing more and more people start to notice the patterns. It's a lot like with the Gen 1er thing. If you grew up in the 2000s and were still actively playing Pokemon, there was this huge push from people in our age group trying to tell you that like Pokemon peaked in Gen 1 and then it stopped being good and that like the series fell off, and like in a lot of ways it was bigger than ever, right? Like the brand was established at that point. It had its audience, but like the narrative was always that like, well, it's gonna fall off any day now. People are just gonna stop playing Pokemon and they're gonna play real games like sports, and they're gonna watch real TV like American Idol. Like it's like, come the fuck on. Pokemon is bigger than all of that shit. Is just my understanding of the situation, and it is high time that we understand that. It is high time that we celebrate Pokemon's successes and acknowledge that this is absolutely one of the biggest brands in video games.